So we're going to do a lighting breakdown of this William Arcand shoot. And I love this shoot. I think it's so beautiful. I love all the images that came out of it. The lighting is really nice. The model casting is great. But just the concept, the way it all comes together, the mix of constant lighting, the strobe lighting, it's just a really beautiful shoot. And I'm going to try and hopefully do it some justice. But there's a couple of things I should point out. I'm going to show you two setups. I'm going to show you a strobe-based setup and then a setup which is strobe and then constant lighting. So like Aries or something like that. I'll put the timestamps down below, so if you want to skip to one or the other. We're going to do the strobe set first because I think that's what most people want to look at. Also, this is kind of different to the TikTok version that I did, which was obviously shorter, but I've kind of refined it since then. I think this is a bit better and closer. We're going to focus on this one image of the model on the bike. And here's a little behind the scenes video that I found on Instagram, I think. And there's some post-production. Obviously, the bike isn't actually running. The back wheel, that motion blur, that's all retouched in Photoshop. And I feel like there's a mix of constant lighting and strobe, but obviously I can't tell exactly what is like post-production and what is real or what is in camera. But we're going to get close and we're going to look at some of the principles, I guess, behind it. And here, let's have a look at what we've got in the studio. I just show you my desktop setup, but I've got the reference image there as I kind of build these things through. In the bottom row, you can see how we're going to kind of break this down. Got our studio space as normal, and then I've split it into layers again of light. So let's just have a quick look at the camera settings. So I'm like ISO 100, f11, 35mm lens. And then we've got a fairly large studio, so I've got like 12-meter studio. The length doesn't matter too much, we're not using the full length of it. And then 5-meter height. Just a like editorial space. I don't think it matters too much with this. We just know that we need a fair bit of space and we need to flag off quite a lot of the light to make this full size now. So let's just zoom around our space. I should say also it took me like forever to pose the model to get something like this. And I downloaded a 3D OBJ file for the motorbike, which you can add 3D OBJs into Satellite if you're not aware of that. That's really helpful. So yeah, let's just have a quick hover around our space. You can see immediately I've got lots of flags, lots of black polyboards. There's a lot of light here, so I want to try and control it as much as possible. See the overhead view of this now. And let's just jump into the first section of this. So we've got the front and the mid lights. Just make that preview image bigger so we see what we're dealing with. So this is just getting that rim lighting, front lighting, the hair lighting. I think what's really beautiful in the final image is the lighting texture on the arm. The arm looks like kind of muscular and defined. That's really beautiful. I love it. The rim light in the hair is great. I like the fact that the front of the bike that's facing the camera is kind of dark and just drifts away a little bit. So what I've tried to do is kind of use some octaves with grids and then some flag around. So this black poly that I've got here, or black flag, this kind of material drape, we'd need to kind of position this a little better depending on what's happening with the motion and so on. But my model is like roughly positioned how I think it could be in here. I'll put these as solo lights so we can see it as we go along. So I've just got an octa, I've got a grid and a diffusion. I think you could do it with just the grid without the diffusion or the other way around. And I've put that as a solo light. I've got a warming gel on here and we can just see it sitting that highlight across the hair, sitting across the forearm towards the handlebars and a little bit at the top of the bike. I think it's fairly accurate. It's fine. We could put a little bit more in that highlight. We could take the gel out if we needed to. So it's like a meter or so above the model. It just gives room for the model to kind of move around. And you can see in the video, like she has a lot of motion to her. So I didn't want to make it too restrictive. And let's put this other rim light on here. So set this as a solo light, bare reflector with a grid in it. I've got a warming gel again, and you can see what that's doing. It's just punching through. It's putting that rim light on the face, on the cheekbone and on the arm, a little bit catching like the rear mudguard. Fairly accurate, seems fine to me. This front octa, I think it doesn't need to be an octa. It could be a reflector just bouncing down into the ground. I'm trying to do two things. I'm trying to clear the ground up a little bit because it's quite clean. That could be done in post-production, obviously, but I'm trying to bounce down into the ground and then put a little bit of bounce light back up into the motorbike. Not too much because I know that we're going to do like post-production on the back wheel to get the motion blur, but I think it needs a little lift in there. Use an octa for that. It could also be a lower head reflector that's much lower on the ground and bouncing up. It's just pushing into the body a little bit, but the main body light is coming from this, just a reflector. I've got a grid number 1 in. Again, like this is about the principle. It's not like this is definitely what was used. So we want to light up the body. So a grid would be really useful for that. So just put a reflector on, put a grid on, and just push light into the body. Again, I've warmed that up, a slight warming gel, like a half CTO maybe, or a third CTO. If I want to bring out more of the face, obviously, I could just bring this up, depending on what I wanted to do with like expression or where the model is moving. So for me, it's about creating separation between the face, the rim light, which is kind of this shoulder texture light that we're putting in there, and then that top light. I want to get the balance right between those three. Okay, so that's covered those top light, rim light, front light and then the fill light. And then let's look at this here. I'm just put this on a solo. I'm just punching into the background. I've got a blue on this. I'm just trying to color the background a little bit, but I'm just pushing light in to create separation between the subject and the background. I've got a grid just to close it down a little bit. So we're just trying to control the area. And if we look at the preview image of this, so that's the rendered version of it. Already you can see it's quite dynamic. Got this nice highlight on arm. Got this highlight on the top of the head. We could position that a little bit more, but like I said, that really depends on like what the posing is. I got this kind of bouncy up light that's coming into the body. I like what's happening here in like the lower back. I think we've got that nice muscle and contrast. This on the arm could be more controllable, and we'll see that on the strobe set, but I think it's fine for what we're trying to do right now. And then let's look at the back row lights here. See the preview image of this in more detail. I'm just trying to light up the background, get some sense of texture to it. There's a nice feeling in the original image of like texture on the floor. It's not super cleaned up, which is also, I think, really nice. It makes it feel very real. It makes you not get distracted by the fact that the back tire is like Photoshop. So again, I'm just breaking up with a number of different lights here. I've got octas. You could maybe use umbrellas. You could use reflectors with grids on, but I've got these octas so that I can kind of spread the light if I want to. So pointing into the ground, got a blue gel on it, it's just cleaning up the ground, putting some texture into it. Then I've got another one that's in the back corner, adding that little highlight that's leading out the frame. I think that's kind of useful. And then on the far side, I've got one that's pushing up into the top of the frame. These have all got like similar gels on them, the blue. So these flags in the corner, those are really important so we're not getting light spill forward. And then let's just look at the rim light in more detail. So this is without the front light and it's without that front bounce light. Let's see the preview image of that so we can compare it. So the one on the left is with the bounce light that's going into the floor and that front octa. And the one on the right is just what I would call the rim light. You can see the real difference that's happening there. That light that's pushing into the body is just lifting everything up, but not a huge amount. That rim light is defining shape, texture, and muscle tone, giving the eye something to kind of really latch onto. We could add more highlight if we want to. I've also toned that, like I said, with a CTO, so it sits back a little bit. If I took that CTO off, the highlight would come forward more. Probably be a little closer to what it is in the original image. And then this is the front light on its own. So let's just jump into the preview version of that. You can see what I mean, hopefully now, with that front light of the octa. It's like bouncing down into the ground. It's giving a little bit of lift into the bike body. And then this top light, which is just pushing into the face. And we can see now in that preview image, I've mixed that blue and that orange gel together. Again, how much separation you want between these two lights would depend what gel you want to put into it. I think there is a nice warm tone to the image. And you see in some of the other images that I'll preview again in a minute, that the model is kind of tanned, but I think that what we're working with here will just give us something. But it's really about playing like that warm and cool together. I think that adds an element of contrast without being like really heavy with it. We're not like playing like red and blue against each other. And let's just zoom in on here so we can see where we're positioning ourselves. So this is also really important. So I've got this black negative fill on this side, black negative fill on this side. I want to soak up like as much bounce light as possible. I don't want light just bouncing around the frame. That's really important to me. So we'll have a look at that in detail in a second. And now we're going to look at the front and the top light together, and we can really see, let me just zoom over with the cursor with the mouse. See that rim light? Super nice. It's doing what we need as a top rim light. And then what we're doing is just pushing that light into the body. We're laying that nice soft light across the top of the leg. That's also really helpful, making a really nice strong shape. Put that as a solo again so we can really see. So this is the top light, slight warming gel, nice highlight on the hair, cool tone into the floor, nice and soft, glowy. We're not defining shape too much. We're just lifting the exposure a little bit here. And then we're really focusing the eye with that grid light into the face. And again, if you think the two lights that we've got warm and then the cool light from the ground, I've really separated the rim light to show, okay, with just the front and the back rim light, what we're trying to do with that, and the idea of the one being more dominant than the other. So with this rim light at the back, I've got it on power 9. I've got this grid on it, which is number 2 grid. And then this light from the front, I've got it at 4.7, and I've got a grid number 1. So it's much tighter. It's going to kind of block out that light to some extent. It's probably not the correct way of describing it, but it's going to control that flow of light. Got no spill light there. But if you look at the kind of lighting ratio, and how much that rim light here across the shoulder is coming forward, that's really important. We could shift that dominance, and I'll show you what that's like, but let me just amp this right up. So we'll put it on 7, and you can see the real shift there. Suddenly it's not about a back rim light and a front light pushing in. It's about a similar light quality from both sides, and that's not what we want to achieve. Let me just push it up the other way. So let's go to like 7.5 on here, and then we're going to drop this one down to what the other one was, like 4.5. And you can see how the dominance and the shape and the feeling of texture and contrast is just gone completely. I've kept the bottom light off because I'll show you the difference of that in a minute. So this is where I think it's really important to understand what the rim light is doing, this backlight, and what the front light is doing. Without that front light, let's turn it off completely. Obviously, you can tell we need that front light to come into the body, but it's about making sure that it's not as powerful and not as dominant as that rim light. That rim light is really giving the eye something to catch onto, and it's really going to exaggerate shape and form when the model is posing. Super helpful. And then with this bottom light on the ground, again, it's another point of like texture of area for our eye to really latch onto. And again, I'm playing like blue off against a warm light. Then the other thing that's useful to see is, so now I've taken all the flags out of the set. So the light is just like bouncing around. We're not controlling it. There's no negative fill anywhere. And let's just compare those two together. On the left-hand side, we've got all the setup as we've just discussed, but with all the flags in it. And then on the right-hand side, we've got without the flags in it. So hopefully you can really see the benefit of negative fill there. If you don't know what like black polys are doing or black flags or drape is doing, it's really just stopping light bounce around. It's stopping stray light. It's just allowing you to kind of control where you want the light to be. And you could have a lot more flags. There's probably more flags in the actual setup than I've got here. But then that really comes down to like where you know the model's going to move. But let's just focus on this and see what's happening. Compare like the arm that's out. In the no flag shot, the arm doesn't look as defined. It's not got the same like muscle tone as it has in the shot that has the flags in it. So again, we're using black flag on negative fill to define shape and add contrast. The same with like this bottom wheel. Yeah, we know we're going to do that in post anyway, but it's darker and heavier when we've got rid of that spill light with all the black flag. And the same with like the bottom of the leg, there's a difference there. The background, you can see there's a big difference to the background when there's no flag. That's like what, a third stop difference, brighter overall. And then also look at what's happening with the face. When we're not controlling with negative fill and we're not controlling that spill light, the whole exposure of the face kind of lifts up. So that negative fill is really about control and accentuating shape and form. And let's just jump back in and let's spin around the set. We can kind of see it from the side now and get a feel of what that actually is. Get a sense of the shape. It's an approximate, right? This will give you an idea. If I want to set up a dynamic set like this is how I could begin to structure it. I'd have a bunch of strobes that are pushing in, which are maybe grid lights. I'd have some octaves that are kind of fill and shaping lights, but they're flagged off so they're not spilling everywhere. But we notice obviously in William Arcand's actual imagery that there's some constant lighting here. So let me show you what I've done with this, and I've called it the mixed source setup. And everything that's these blue lights here, the arrays, some kind of constant lighting. And you can see that I've used those to push into the model and to add some rim lighting. What we can do right away, we can compare the final image. So this is the mixed source lighting on the left, and then on the right is the strobe only setup. You may have a preference. I immediately prefer the mixed source lighting. I love mixing strobe and constant lighting anyway. I feel that's what's happened here. Also, once you get to shoot like that, like lighting can be about like texture, right? And I was having a great conversation with the studio manager last week about this. Like, what is the texture of LED lighting? It feels like crispy and a bit sharp, whereas maybe like old school constant lighting doesn't feel so crispy and sharp. Some of that might just be in like your mind, the eye of the beholder. I feel there is something to it. And it's sort of like that film digital thing, but a little bit more emotional maybe. A lot of old school like Hollywood constant lighting has a very different feel to it. And I don't want to get into the physics of it because I don't know it completely, but like the wavelength of light, the way it like bounces off skin, there's a sharpness to it. And obviously LED is like lots of little tiny light sources. That's different to maybe like an arc light. There are definitely like cinematographers and so on that have way deeper knowledge than me about this, that I'm just kind of have a feeling I like to mix some of these light sources together because I think you get a bit more of a wrap feel. And that's what I'm observing in this image on the left, that I've got a nicer sense of control using the mix of the constant lighting. Let's just jump back in to see what that setup is. So what we're looking at here, let's just see the larger preview image. This is just the position of the constant lighting, and we're using a constant lighting to hit the background obviously with that nice blue. But the main thing is we're using constant light to the body. Let's just make this a solo light. see in that preview image what that beautiful light is doing. It's softer, it's shaping. It'll be really nice for like toning and muscle texture and also just movement. Then put this background light on. It's a blue gel on here, just pushing that light straight into the background. Nothing like too exciting happening with that. Again, it's a less crispy feel than if we have strobe. And there's ways obviously of diffusing strobe as well, but the more you begin to like diffuse things like that, the more it's going to bounce around, and there's other things to consider. And let's just have this floor light also. You can see it's just catching the arm a little bit. And again, this is a light that I've got a blue gel on. For me, it's really about what this front light is doing. And I love the way that I can put a constant lighting in and just kind of clean up the skin a little bit. Let's look at the strobes. The strobes are in pretty much exactly the same position as they are in the all strobe set. Nothing is really changing. We still got our background lights. Slightly different. I didn't have an octa on at the time that I set this up, but it could be an octa, it could be fine. So I've got the background lights in this kind of like row at the back with these blue lights on. I've got my octa over the top, got my light pushing into the front. Pretty much the same as all of this. And let's see the preview image of that. So this is just the strobe set. This is just the constant. Let's see them side by side. And obviously this is software, right? So it's going to render them differently. But you can see what I mean, like the crispy edge of the strobe set. And when we bring it all together, we get this mixed source lighting. And I like it. I think it's got a depth to it, a feeling that I'm into. Let's compare it again side by side with the strobe only. So hopefully that gives a pretty good overview of how this set could have come together. A while ago when I was making the TikTok, I exported some of these, put a curve on it, did some Photoshop, put some grain into it, removed the kickstand, just all those things to kind of clean it up. But I don't think it's necessary to show that right now. I think it's just about getting that principle. And let's just look over that one more time of this idea that we've got a background lighting and a wave, we've got a rim lighting, and then we've got our front lighting pushing in. We're really controlling the space by using flags. So nice controllable rim lighting, adds shape, adds the feeling of muscle tone because we've got highlight from the back and nice soft light from the front, a top highlight, which is also working nicely with the front, and then just bringing it all together and looking at that and go, okay, that gives us enough that we can work with, right? We can retouch it. We know we can retouch the ground. We know we need to like bring contrast and saturation to where we want it to. We can put a nice curve on it. And hopefully that gives you an overview. Let's have a look at some of the other images from that shoot because it's really beautiful. Also, if you don't know William Arcand's work, or if you don't know any of the photographers when I'm talking about them, please go and have a look at their work because it's amazing. And I definitely don't want to like take anything away from their work. This is just like hopefully helpful tutorial to give you like a starting point. But the work here is beautiful. I encourage you all to go have a look at it. So the solo rider on the bike, super nice. Again, like great use of highlight, skin toning, good feeling of texture to it. I love the color backdrop. And this I mean with that constant lighting. There's other ways to achieve this, but it looks like he's using like a shutter drag. It could be done in post, obviously, but I don't get that feeling. It's nicer to think that this is constant lighting mixed with strobe lighting, especially in an image like this. A lot of beautiful use of gel light. William Arcand is an excellent use of color. And then another feeling here that's a bit more crispy. This is a little bit more of a strobe-based view of the set. And let's just recap that biker shot of the video. So you're trying to create space, feeling a sense of movement, and creating an area where the model can move around, but we can still get that feeling of highlight to it, which is those kind of strobes coming from the back. It's a nice back shot where we can see, again, we can see that really strong highlight, right? This like strobey kind of highlight that's hitting on the elbow. This nice way the light is laying across the skin. This idea of like texture or shadow, highlight, allowing the back to fall into contrast, really emphasize like muscle tone, dropping the highlight across the top of the shoulders again, creates like sense of form. So yeah, that's the roundup for the William Arcand bike shoot. Feel free to dig into the comments. There's things that could be refined. I think the principle kind of works. Hopefully it was useful. If you like it, add a like, add a comment. All of those things help. The more people that watch, the more I can make these videos. So I really do appreciate any feedback. And yeah, thank you for watching.